Everyone saw my wife as a beautiful mess. But one night, a whispered conversation revealed a devastating secret that threatened to destroy our future. The wine glass shattered the silence before it shattered on the floor. One moment, my wife Anna was laughing, her whole body shaking with amusement at one of my dad's terrible jokes. The next, her elbow had connected with the stem of her Chardonnay, sending it arcing through the air in a perfect, glittering parabola. It landed with a crash that made the entire restaurant turn to look at our table. A crimson stain, looking shockingly like blood, began to spread across the pristine white tablecloth. My mother's smile became a thin, tight line. My father cleared his throat and tried to pretend nothing had happened. And my sister, Chloe, sitting directly across from me, just closed her eyes for a brief second. It was a look of pure, unadulterated suffering, as if Anna hadn't just spilled some wine, but had personally insulted every one of her ancestors. "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry," Anna stammered, her face flushing a shade that almost matched the wine. She was already on her knees, dabbing at the spill with her napkin, which was, of course, making it worse. A waiter rushed over with a look of practiced patience, assuring her it was fine, but the damage was done. The quiet judgment from my family was a tangible thing, a heavy blanket that smothered the rest of the anniversary dinner. This was Anna, my brilliant, kind, chaotic Anna. She was an artist, and she lived her life like one of her canvases, full of vibrant color, bold strokes, and the occasional, beautiful mess. She'd show up to a black tie event with a smear of cerulean blue paint behind her ear. She'd get so lost in a story that she'd forget to eat. She saw beauty in things no one else did. The rust patterns on an old fire escape, the way light filtered through a dusty window. I didn't just love her for it, I adored her for it. My family, however, saw it differently. To them, she wasn't an artist. She was just a mess. Later, as we waited for the valet outside the restaurant, the cold night air felt like a relief. Anna had gone to the restroom, and Chloe seized the opportunity. She moved to stand beside me, pulling her perfect cashmere wrap tighter around her shoulders. "I just don't get it, Mark," she said, her voice low and sharp. "It's Mom and Dad's 40th anniversary. Couldn't she have tried, just for one night, to be normal?" I bristled. "She was being herself, Chloe. She knocked over a glass of wine. It's not a federal crime." "It's never just one thing, is it?" she shot back, her eyes flashing. "It's the paint-splattered dress she insisted was cooter, the story she told about dumpster diving for art supplies, the wine glass. Your wife is such a mess. It's embarrassing to be seen with her." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart. I'd heard versions of this speech for the 5 years Anna and I had been together. Usually I could deflect it with a joke or a change of subject, but tonight I was done. "You know what's embarrassing, Chloe?" I said, turning to face her fully. "It's that you can't see past a perfectly tailored suit or a brand-name handbag. You don't see the woman who volunteers at the animal shelter every single weekend. You don't see the person who sat with me for 72 straight hours in the hospital when Dad had his scare last year. You just see someone who doesn't fit into your neat little box." Chloe just shook her head, a pitying look on her face that I hated more than her anger. "You're so naive. You think her spirit and creativity are enough to build a life on. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." She paused, looking over my shoulder as if to make sure Anna wasn't coming back yet. Then she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Honestly, Mark," she said, her gaze intense and serious, "considering everything, you're lucky you didn't sign those papers." I stared at her, completely thrown. My mind went blank. We hadn't signed any major papers recently. The mortgage was in both our names. The car was paid off. What was she talking about? "What papers?" I asked, a cold dread starting to creep up my spine. "Chloe, what papers are you talking about?" She looked away, a flicker of something regret. fear crossing her face. Nothing. Just forget it. It's not my place. No, I insisted, grabbing her arm. She tried to pull away, but I held on. You don't get to drop a bomb like that and walk away. You started this. Finish it. Lucky I didn't sign what? Chloe looked me dead in the eye, and the pity was gone, replaced by a chilling certainty. The adoption papers, Mark. You're lucky you didn't sign the adoption papers. The words hung in the frigid air between us, crystalline and sharp. Adoption papers. My brain struggled to connect the phrase to the context, to the venom in Chloe's voice. We had talked about it, of course. For the past year, Anna and I had been dreaming of starting a family. We'd visited agencies, filled out preliminary questionnaires, attended informational meetings, but we hadn't submitted the final application. We'd decided to wait until after her big gallery show in the spring. It was our secret, our precious plan for the future. What are you talking about? I whispered, my voice hoarse. My grip on her arm tightened. How do you even know about that? Chloe wrenched her arm free, her expression a mixture of disgust and a strange, warped kind of pity. Oh, please, Mark. Anna tells me everything, or at least she thinks she does. She called me a few months ago crying, talking about how she wasn't sure she was ready, how she was terrified. I assumed she'd told you she got cold feet and you'd put it on hold. She looked past me, and her face shifted. The hard lines softened into a mask of polite indifference. Here she comes. For God's sake, try to pull yourself together. You look like you've seen a ghost. And there was Anna, walking towards us, a radiant smile on her face. She'd reapplied her lipstick, a bold slash of crimson that made her look like a classic movie star. She was blissfully unaware that my entire world had just been fractured. She looped her arm through mine, pressing a cold cheek against my shoulder. Sorry about that. There was a line. Are we ready to go? The valet pulled our car around. Chloe gave me one last meaningful look before getting into her own vehicle with a curt, "Good night." The ride home was a silent, suffocating torture. Anna, sensing my mood, put on some soft jazz and rested her hand on my thigh. Usually, her touch was an anchor. Tonight, it felt like a brand. Every pothole we hit was a jolt to my system, a physical manifestation of the questions ricocheting around my skull. You're lucky you didn't sign them. What did Chloe know? Why would she say something so cruel, so destructive? Was this just another one of her attempts to sabotage my happiness, to prove that my messy wife was a mistake? Or was there something more? Something real? The image of Anna, crying and terrified on the phone to my sister, of all people, played on a loop in my mind. She'd never mentioned that call to me. She'd never expressed anything but ecstatic excitement about our future family. When we got back to our apartment, the comfortable clutter of our life seemed to mock me. Her half-finished paintings leaned against the walls, canvases alive with raw emotion. Her clay-dusted boots were kicked off by the door. This was our home. This was our life. Was it all a lie? "Are you okay, honey?" Anna asked, her brow furrowed with concern as I stood. Jiang Ying lay in the middle of the living room. "You've been quiet ever since we left the restaurant. Was it my sister again?" No, just tired," I lied, the words tasting like ash. "Long week. I think I'm just going to take a hot shower and head to bed." She gave me a gentle kiss. "Okay, I'm going to work in the studio for a bit. I've got this burst of inspiration." I watched her disappear into her studio, the one place that was entirely hers, her sanctuary. And in that moment, Chloe's voice echoed in my head. "You think her spirit and creativity are enough to build a life on?" A wave of nausea washed over me. I had to know. I waited until I heard the rhythmic scrape of her palette knife against canvas. Then I went to our shared office. I didn't even know what I was looking for. I opened the filing cabinet where we kept our important documents: mortgage, car title, insurance policies. In the back, there was a folder labeled Future. Inside were the brochures from the adoption agencies, the informational packets, a copy of the multi-page application form we had started filling out together. It was exactly as I remembered it. Nothing was signed. Nothing seemed out of place. I felt a momentary rush of relief. Chloe was just being Chloe malicious, manipulative. I was about to close the drawer when my fingers brushed against a smaller, unfamiliar folder tucked deep behind everything else. It was plain manila, with no label. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I pulled it out. It was thin, holding only a few sheets of paper. They weren't adoption forms, they were letters. Official letters, on heavy letterhead from the County of San Diego's Child Welfare Services. They were dated 6 years ago, a year before I met Anna, and they were all addressed to an Anna Kowalski. My Anna's maiden name was Peterson. My hands trembled as I read the first line of the top letter. Dear Ms. Kowalski, this letter is to inform you of the court's final decision regarding the termination of parental rights for the minor child, Leo Kowalski. Beneath the letters was a small, worn photograph, the kind you get from a drugstore photo booth. It was of Anna, her face younger, thinner, haunted. She was holding a tiny, dark-haired baby wrapped in a pale blue blanket, a baby whose existence she had never, ever mentioned to me. The photograph was a ghost of a life Anna had lived entirely without me, a life she had sealed away in a manila folder and buried in the back of a filing cabinet. Leo Kowalski. The name felt alien, impossible. The woman in the picture was Anna, but her eyes were hollow, reflecting a despair so profound it felt like I was trespassing just by looking at it. The vibrant, chaotic, joyful woman I had built my life with was nowhere to be found in that small, faded square. I sank into the office chair, the papers rattling in my unsteady hands. Termination of parental rights. The phrase was clinical, brutal. It meant a child was taken away, irrevocably. My mind raced, trying to stitch together the torn fabric of the reality I thought I knew. Anna Kowalski. Why the different name? Was she hiding from something? Was the mess my family saw not just spilled wine and paint splatters, but the fallout from a past so devastating she had to erase it completely? Chloe's words came back to me, no longer sounding malicious, but like a desperate warning. Your wife is such a mess. You're lucky you didn't sign the adoption papers. It wasn't a jab at her clumsiness. It was about this, about a child she'd had and lost, a child I never knew existed. The betrayal was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. How could she keep this from me? We had promised each other everything, no secrets. We had talked for hours about the kind of parents we wanted to be, the kind of life we wanted to give a child, and all that time, she was carrying this. I must have sat there for an hour, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me, broken only by the distant sounds from Anna's studio. Finally, I stood up, the folder in my hand, and walked to her studio door. I pushed it open without knocking. She was standing in front of a huge canvas, her back to me. The painting was a whirlwind of dark blues and angry slashes of red, a stark contrast to her usual bright, hopeful work. She didn't turn around. "You found it," she said, her voice quiet, brittle. "I always wondered if you would." "Anna," I managed, my own voice a stranger's. "Who is Leo?" She put down her palette knife and slowly turned to face me. Her face was streaked with tears that had mixed with the blue paint on her hands, creating ghostly trails down her cheeks. The haunted look from the photograph was back. "He was my son," she said. The story came out in broken pieces, a confession she had clearly been holding in for years. She had gotten pregnant at 19 with a man who had left the moment she told him. She had been completely alone, working 2 jobs, living in a tiny apartment. She tried. God, she tried so hard. But postpartum depression had hit her like a tidal wave, pulling her under into a darkness she couldn't escape. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't care for the baby who depended on her for everything. That's when Child Services stepped in. Kowalski was her mother's maiden name, a name she'd used in her youth to try and feel separate from her own difficult family. By the time the fog of depression began to lift, it was too late. The courts had made their decision. Leah was placed with a loving family, and she was left with nothing but a court order and a hole in her soul. I changed my name legally back to Peterson. I moved here to start over, she whispered, her gaze fixed on the floor. When I met you, it was like the sun came out for the first time in years. You were so good, so stable. I was terrified that if you knew the mess I had really made of my life, you would leave. I wasn't just clumsy Anna who spilled wine. I was a failure. The worst kind of failure a woman can be. Her fear about our own adoption plans suddenly made a gut-wrenching kind of sense. It wasn't cold feet. It was terror. The terror of failing again, of proving the courts and herself right. Why Chloe? I asked, the last piece of the puzzle. Why did you tell her and not me? Because she's a mother, Anna said, finally looking at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. I was having a panic attack one day thinking about the home study, about them digging into my past. I called her, desperate. I just needed to ask another mom if I was a monster. I never told her the details, just that I was scared. I didn't know she would ever use it against me, against us. I looked from her tear-stained face to the painting behind her, a maelstrom of pain and color. This was her truth. All the chaos, all the mess. It wasn't just a personality quirk. It was the outward expression of a life that had been shattered and painstakingly glued back together. I had fallen in love with the beautiful mosaic, never even thinking to ask about the cracks. I closed the distance between us and wrapped my arms around her. She collapsed against me, her body racked with sobs she had held back for 6 long years. I wasn't angry anymore. All I felt was a profound, aching love for this woman, this survivor. You are not a failure, I said, holding her tight. You were a kid, alone and sick, and the system failed you. You're the strongest person I know. We stood there for a long time in the middle of her beautiful, messy studio. The life I thought I had was gone, replaced by one far more complex, more painful, but infinitely more real. Chloe had meant for her words to be a bomb to destroy us, but she'd failed. All she had done was detonate a secret that, once cleared, left nothing behind but the truth. And the truth was, Anna wasn't a mess to be embarrassed by. She was a masterpiece forged in fire. And our future, whether it included a child or not, was something we would build together, out of all the broken, beautiful pieces.